Gemini Control here again. Earlier in the flight, you'll recall at the start of the second revolution, we had a reference to several objects that the crew spotted.
A bogey at 10 o'clock high.
Say again, 7?
So we have a bogey at 10 o'clock high.
That transmission was classified for 60 years. The Pentagon released it in May 2026. This is not a second-hand account, not an anonymous source. This is the original NASA audio, now publicly available at war.gov/UFO. File designation NASA-UAP-D3A. Published May 8th, 2026. Let's go through exactly what it contains. Frank Borman was not a UFO enthusiast. West Point graduate, US Air Force test pilot, NASA astronaut selected in 1962. 3 years after Gemini 7, he commanded Apollo 8, the first crewed spacecraft to orbit the Moon. On Christmas Eve 1968, he read from Genesis to a global television audience of roughly 1 billion people. Jim Lovell was his pilot. He later commanded Apollo 13, the mission that nearly killed him and brought him home anyway. These were two of the most scrutinized, most credible people America had ever put into orbit. When Borman radioed, "We have a bogey," Mission Control did not dismiss it. They asked follow-up questions for 9 minutes. Before we go further, if you were Mission Control in 1965 and Frank Borman, one of the most decorated astronauts alive, just reported a bogey, what would your first question have been? Drop it below. I read every single one. Here is the full exchange, word for word from the transcript. Mission Control asked Borman to clarify.
Gemini 7, is that the booster or is that an actual sighting?
Borman responded,
Okay, we have several, looks like debris up there, actual sighting.
3 separate objects, in addition to the booster, in addition to the debris field. Lovell then described what he was looking at.
I have the booster on my side as a brilliant body of the sun against a black background and with billions of particles around it. It's ahead of us, 2 o'clock, slowly tumbling.
In the margin of the official NASA file, someone wrote 4 words by hand. UFO sighting by Borman. That note sat in a classified file since 1965 until May 2026. There are 3 standard ways to dismiss a UFO sighting. The witness is not credible, the conditions were poor, or there is an obvious conventional explanation. The Gemini 7 sighting fails all 3. Borman and Lovell were in orbit, in full sunlight, perfect visibility. They had just separated from their booster. They knew exactly what it looked like. They described it separately, and they described something else. Mission Control asked twice if the bogey was the booster. Borman said no, both times. The Pentagon's own assessment, evidentiary weight, that this encounter remains unexplained after conventional analysis. 60 years, still unexplained. 11 days after the Gemini 7 sighting, Gemini 6 rendezvoused with Gemini 7. Commander Wally Schirra, pilot Tom Stafford. After the rendezvous, Schirra radioed back. "We have an object, looks like a satellite going from north to south, probably in a polar orbit." And then Jingle Bells, on a harmonica, smuggled aboard. The polar bogey was Santa Claus. I tell you this for one reason: not every unexplained sighting is unexplained. Schirra knew the difference. Borman knew the difference too, and Borman said what he saw was an actual sighting. Subscribe to Untold Universe so you're here when it drops. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. The Gemini 7 file is not the only astronaut report in the Pursuit archive. 1965 was, according to the FBI files, the year of the greatest number of UFO sightings ever documented at that point. Apollo 11, 1969. Buzz Aldrin told government investigators he observed a fairly bright light source in space. He described it as, which we tentatively ascribed to a possible laser. A laser in space. In 1969. No explanation was ever found. Apollo 12. Also, 1969. Lunar surface photographs. Pentagon caption, unidentified phenomena are visible. 4 words, no description, no explanation. Apollo 17, 1972.
Looks like the 4th of July outrun window.
Right, they look like fluorescent, sir?
Not to me, they look like pieces of something.
Fluid, moving through space near a crewed spacecraft, classified until this month. In September 2023, 3 federal eyewitnesses were operating LiDAR technology in restricted airspace. One was the officer who had personally closed that airspace. What she reported to the FBI, a cigar-shaped object with an extremely bright light, an intense diamond white light with a ring around it. The object was already there when she looked up, almost hovering, slowly moving east to west. Length 130 to 195 feet. Shape ellipsoid. Bronze metallic. That disappeared instantaneously. The Pentagon's classification of that 2023 case, unresolved. The same word they use for Gemini 7, 58 years apart.
Gemini Control here again. The reference in that conversation to the third unidentified object, of course, the third object was bogey. It was Borman who reported sighting the bogey.
One more thing worth knowing. December 1965 was the height of the Cold War. Both the US and Soviet Union were watching each other's space programs obsessively. Any unidentified object near a NASA spacecraft was treated as a potential Soviet threat first, extraterrestrial possibility second. Mission Control asked twice if it was the booster. They weren't being cautious. They were ruling out the most dangerous explanation before considering the others. They ruled it out. The bogey remained unexplained. Frank Borman died in November 2023. He never received a public explanation for what he and Jim Lovell saw on December 5, 1965. The Pentagon released the audio 7 months after he died. Whatever they saw is still officially unexplained, and the second Pursuit release, more files, more transcripts, is expected next month. Whatever is in it, this channel will cover it the day it drops. Frank Borman never got his answer. Subscribe to Untold Universe so you're here when the next release drops. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, every week. Earlier I asked what you would have done as Mission Control. Now I want to know something else. After everything in this video, do you think Borman knew exactly what he was looking at? Or did he genuinely have no idea? Comments are open. The full breakdown of the first 162 Pentagon files is in the previous video.